Hello, I'm the FanFic Critic. I read it, you listen. Today is going to be another Pokemon fanfic, but at this point anything beats reading anything that has to do with a certain purple dinosaur that likes to sing I love you songs. Today's fanfic is called Sorrow by Sharked93. This is on DeviantArt, so it's not a fanfiction.net thing, but it does have comments, I believe. 23 comments, okay, and 4 people have favored it. So I'm not going to read all the comments out loud. Let's just see if the story's good or not by me reading it out loud. So, let's read Sorrow. Sitting atop the moss-covered rock, a lonely creature sits weeping, the tears of sorrow many a creature has shed before. The darkness sticking to him as though it was attached to the lone creature. All was quiet as the trees and the earth seemed to weep along with this creature. For in the world of Pokemon, all is possible. The forest breathed the same life as the creature, for it was a Leafian, a plant-animal hybrid. This was Eterna Forest, and it was connected to this Leafian. Okay, you should capitalize the L on Leafian, seeing Leafian is a name, or Leafeon, whatever. It felt what this creature felt. In this world, however, this wasn't as extraordinary as the events about to occur, I can't speak today, sorry, for this Leafian. Again, you should capitalize the L on Leafian. But, as it is customary with humans, an introduction is in order before this tale unfolds. This particular Leafian is unique among the Pokemon. His name was Soul, and he is 16 years old. Okay, you just said his name was Soul, and then in the next part of the sentence you say he is 16 years old. You don't need to be switching back and forth between past tense and present tense. Go with one or the other. Born in Eterna Forest as an Eevee, his life was ruined from the start. They need to capitalize, the names like Eevee and stuff. Okay. Okay, that was all one paragraph. I do think they need to break up the paragraphs more, but I think the next paragraph is supposed to be a flashback. His mother was a very beautiful Espian, who died giving birth to him. She loved him even though she never got to know him. Soul's father was a very handsome Umbreon. His father adored Soul, and named him that due to the fact that Soul was born with 3 sun marks on his body. Should be the word 3, not the number 3. On his head, on his chest, and on his tail. Soul had 2 brothers, should be the word 2, not the number 2, an Umbreon and a Flareon. They blamed Soul entirely for their mother's death, should be apostrophe S for mother, and hated him to his very core. Soul didn't care, however, for he had his father and he knew he'd always be safe. That is until the day he turned 10, and his brother attempted to murder him. Soul's father, I think they need an apostrophe S for Soul. Soul's father tried to save him, and in the end gave up his life protecting Soul. Soul's brothers didn't care because they had never had a fond relationship with the Umbreon. As the two prepared to finish Soul off, he touched the rock he was at the present sitting on. At that moment he evolved into a Leafian, his modern form. In the end, he was forced to kill his brothers to avenge his father's death. After he killed his remaining family, he sat shocked by what his birthday had resulted in. As he was paralyzed with shock, two scientists snuck up and captured him, seeing him as the ideal test subject for their new experiment. Slowly, over the next 4 years, the scientists successfully implanted him with the DNA of all the evolutions, making him the combinations of powers of a Leafian, Glacian, Umbrian, Espian, Flareon, Jolton, and Vaporeon. I think I'm supposed to be saying on. I keep on messing up, sorry. All housed in the Leafeon's body. Soul managed to escape at the end of his 4-year stay. He walked the world believing himself to be a freak. Once he returned to the forest where he was born, he discovered many friends who helped him through the years. Now we return again to the present, tears being shed as though his eyes turned into waterfalls. He was drowning in his sorrows, as he continued to weep far into the night. At the time when the moon rises to its highest point in the sky, he was discovered by another creature that ran towards him. However, he didn't even hear the footsteps as he remembered what caused him to feel so much sorrow that day. Okay, here's the next paragraph, and it's yet another flashback. It was a morning of incredible purity and beauty. Soul had risen with an incredible energy. Today was the day he would finally do it. He would attempt to ask the girl he had fallen for out. With an inhuman vigor found commonly among Pokemon, he ran through the forest he now protected towards a river. On the way, he stopped by a cave to greet his friend, a very pretty Espian named Shine. "Hiya, Shine," said Soul with a cheery tone. Jumping with surprise, Shine greeted her friend back. "Hi, Soul." Shine nuzzled Soul as was her customary ways. Soul smiles and felt the sunshine warm his fur. It felt wonderful, and he glowed in the feeling of the warm rays coating his fur. "You seem excited today," Shine said, snapping him back into reality. "I am. Today is going to be a wonderful day." Shine tilted her head. "And may I ask why that is?" "Of course," replied Soul. "I'm finally going to do it." "Do what?" "Ask Wave out." Shine's eyes flashed sadly, but Soul thought nothing of it. He was too happy to notice anything, really. He just smiled, and by the time he looked back down, Shine's eyes were back to normal. "All right, I'm so happy for you, Soul," nuzzling while she said this. "Thanks, Shine. I'm glad you're my friend." Okay, there's 2 periods in that sentence. You just need 1. Shine nodded and went back to her den. For what purpose, Soul was unsure, but he could barely contain his excitement. He turned and ran again towards the river. But he slowed down as he finally approached the river. His eyes flashed with worry as the scent of an Umbrian filled his sensitive nostrils. As if in response, the sunlight around him grew dim. Shaking off the slightly worried feelings around him, he continues onward. As the river came into sight, Soul saw something sitting on the edge of the bank. As foretold by the smell, it was an Umbrian, one with which Soul was familiar. It was his friend Talon. He was built large even for an Umbrian. The scar running down the left side of his face was a dead giveaway to his identity. Soul bounded in a few leaps to him. "Hey, Talon!" What's with all the exclamation points? You just need 1. Unless he's supposed to be, like, wicked excited, I suppose. Talon looked over and saw his friend and smiled. "Hi, Soul," Talon said, smiling. "What brings you here?" "I finally got the courage to ask Wave out," says Soul in an excited tone. As he said that, he noticed an odd look come across Talon's normally peaceful face. The more he saw it, the more a realization came over him. Talon was on the bank of the river where Wave lived and seemed to be waiting for something. "Talon," Soul says quietly. "Yes, Soul, I am in love with Wave. I always have been ever since you introduced her to me. She's so nice, I just have to ask her out." "I'm sorry," Talon said with a bit of regret in his voice. But Soul, as calm as ever, simply replied, "Let's allow her the choice, and let's make a deal that no matter who she chooses, we remain friends." Yeah, something tells me that's not going to work out. Taken aback by his kindness, Talon simply replied, "Of course." As the two friends waited on the river bank, they began to discuss the general topics affecting their lives. I'm just going to pause for a minute. This is probably Quizilla layout, as one of my readers has pointed out, where there is definite paragraphs, but there's no paragraph spacing, so it's still just one big blob of text. Like normally when you start a new paragraph, you make sure there's a space in between the other paragraphs. I mean, it's not like a huge block of text with no definite spacing altogether. There's spacing, but not paragraph spacing, so it's sort of hard to read. And I mean, I don't think the layout's too bad, it just needs paragraph spacing. Let's continue. Of course, they avoided bringing up Wave due to the fact they didn't want to have a fight occur, especially not near her river. They didn't even notice as the sun began to reach high noon until Soul started glowing. Talon was accustomed to seeing the sight. Seems it's new now. Indeed. It still amazes me how you do that. Well, remember, Talon, I am a Leafian. Very true. Just as you gain power with the sun, I do with the moon. Soul nods and yawns, as does Talon. They both sat down and started to nap. Soul was looking forward to waking up and finding Wave sitting on the bank for him. At this point, Soul realized he should have seen what was going to happen to him. He cried and took a deep breath as the footsteps got closer. Still, he was suffering too much to notice. I guess that's supposed to be present tense because it's, or what's going on presently because it's in a separate paragraph, and now it looks like it's going back to the flashback. Soul was awoken by a light shaking. He opened his eyes to see Talon looking over him. Ugh, what happened? Talon laughs. We dozed off for an hour. No way, Soul says, laughing. Yep, and she hasn't showed up yet. Sniffing the air, Soul says, she's on her way, Talon. Talon nods, knowing better than to question Soul's sense of smell. As he sat up alongside Soul, they both heard a swishing sound. Looking towards the river, the two saw a Vaporeon with shining eyes walking onto the shore. This was Wave, the Pokemon that both of them looked to make theirs. However, none of these two dared to make a move as they waited for her to walk to them. She bounded up the bank, smiling and looking at the two. Hi, Soul. Hi, Talon. What brings you two here on this day? It's just driving me crazy that they're not using the word two, that they keep on using the number two. It's driving me bonkers, and it's not just with the number two either. It's every single time a number is mentioned, it's the number, not the letter, or the word, not letter. Both blushed at the same time as the sleek Vaporeon looked on in wonder. Talon, why are you here? She asked. Well, he stammers. She turns to Soul. Soul, what about you? Well... At the same time, they both said, I'm here to ask you out, Wave. Wave blushed so hard her face turned purple. But then she smiled as the two males looked around in embarrassment. Then as she realized what this meant, her smiles faded. So she has more than one mouth. I can choose only one of you. Oh, okay. In unison, I know, Wave. But Soul stepped forward saying, don't worry, we already agreed to be friend no matter what when this is over. I think you mean friends. All we want is for you to be happy. Talon then said, wait, that means you like us back. Wave continued blushing and said, I always have. You two have such amazing qualities. I just didn't know you both liked me. The pair smiled and then Soul stepped forward. Why don't you take us each out on a date? Talon at 5 and me at 9. I want Talon to have the first chance to take you out. Why? Okay, you need a question mark, not a comma, asked Wave curiously. I have my reasons. Truth is, Talon was the closest thing Soul had to a brother now. He wanted Talon to have happiness, and if that means losing Wave to him, then that was the cost. But he still wanted Wave, because he loved her. Talon blinks and says, thank you, Soul. Don't thank me, just have fun. Soul turns to Wave and bids her farewell after she agreed to the dates. Soul then headed home and fell asleep. As he slept, He dreamt of the forest and all of its bounty. I think you need a period to end that, seeing the H and he is capitalized after the word bounty. He always dreamed of this, only this time the forest seemed darker and sadder. He couldn't figure out why, and before he could, he awoke. Man, dreams are so confusing, he says, looking at the clock. Damn it, 8 p.m., I better get ready. Sol proceeded to groom himself and look for the nicest flowers he could find. Picking them out, he planned his entire date in his head. He was going to take Wave to an area of the forest only he knew, that not even Talon had ever seen. His stomach was flipping in knots as he waited for Wave to show up. He couldn't believe this was about to happen. He had been waiting for this moment ever since he met Wave. Suddenly, hey, Sol. Sol turned and smiled as he saw Wave. Hi, Wave, he said cheerily, in his particular happy tone. Wave looked around. What is it, Wave? I have to cancel the date. I didn't see that coming. Actually, I did, but... Why? In big capital letters. Well, Talon and I had so much fun, and I truly loved him, and I don't think you could be as impressive as he was on his date. Well, gee, that was harsh. Sol felt as if 1 second his entire world had come crashing down. I don't even get a chance? Look, this is tough for me. And it's not for me? I don't even get a look. I made my decision. I choose Talon. Sorry, Sol. Tears forming in his eyes, he looked at the Vaporeon he had fallen in love with. The eyes looking back, however, were not the depths of love he had once viewed them as. They were now a pool of pain and sorrow that seemed to call him towards the emotions building inside. Tears rolling down his face, he said, Well, I hope you're happy with him. Sol, don't do this. We can still be friends. Sobbing, Sol said, Well, tell Talon I won't be talking to either of you two for a while. Matter of fact, anyone for that matter. As thought the forest felt his pain, the darkness thickened and the tree seemed to slouch. Wave noticed this too. Sol, please. Goodbye, Sol said, turning and running deep into the forest, hearing Wave calling his name a few more times. Well, gee, Wave, what did you expect? You pretty much say, Oh, well, I dated the other guy and I thought he was impressive and I don't think there's any way you could be as impressive as you, so I'm just going to say no to the date. I mean, geez, you should have at least given him a chance. I don't know. Sol, or explained it better than you did. Sol ran to the stone where he had been born and sat on top of it all night. As midnight struck, he simply looked up. Why, Wave, he thought. Why is it in parentheses? It's supposed to be his thoughts, but that just looks so stupid. You shouldn't have it in parentheses. You should have it be italicized. If it's, yeah, I think it's possible to italicize stuff on DeviantArt. Why, Wave, he thought. Why do you not even give me a chance? Okay, it should be a question, not a statement. I love you. But if you are so heartless as to not allow me a chance to win your heart, then I suppose it's better to give that up. And thus we come back to Lonely Sol, his spirit shattered and heart destroyed by the very creature he thought he loved. He looked ahead into the blackness, hoping for something to end his sorrow. His heart felt empty, and he felt as though he could die right there. He had never felt so betrayed in his life. He could tell from reading Wave's eyes that the decision wasn't hers alone, and that she and Talon had discussed that. The Pokemon he looked to as a brother and friend had stabbed him in the back. Suddenly, don't you mean then? Suddenly, a beam was cast in front of Sol. A beam of lunar light was cast in front of him. Okay, you just said in the last sentence that a light was cast in front of Sol, so you don't need to repeat that. He stared into the light curiously and then remembered something Talon had said to him. Talon said his power rises with the moon, he thought, as does Wave's. As realization came over him, he began to sob uncontrollably. This must be Arceus's way to tell him that it was inevitable and Sol had never really had a chance. Why am I like this? He said. I'm a freak, and should never exist. No wonder she doesn't want to go out with me. All I am to her is a freak. No girl will ever love me. How could they? But at least I have Eterna Forest. Don't you mean the Eterna Forest? He looked at the woods and felt a little bit of happiness rise up, only to be consumed by the sorrow he felt. He doubted anything could make him feel again. He was the sun, and yet he felt like he was being eclipsed. The poor Leafian, who had been through so much pain and sorrow, thought of this event as a way to show all he deserved was more pain and more sorrow. The forest simply remained quiet around him, and Sol sat in complete darkness. As stated already, he had no idea someone was sneaking up on him. He was too wrapped up in the tornado of dark pain swirling inside of his mind, heart, and spirit, so he had no idea what was coming when suddenly, whomp! A body smacked up against him and sent him flying off his perch as he had been sitting upon that entire night. Too sad to even fight, he just looked up, praying that this was the relief he had been looking for. Maybe whatever I is wants to attack him. Whatever I is? I think you mean whatever it is, wants to attack him and end his pathetic existence. But all he saw was a familiar silhouette in front of him, in front of the glaring moon. Suddenly he realized what the shape was and noticed that tears were falling from it onto the stone. The tears seemed to glow with an odd energy that touched they touched the rock, I think. A familiar voice filled with crying said, "How could you think that?" "Think what?" "That you don't deserve to live," said the voice as the body stepped out of the way of the moon into the shadows. Sol's hunch had been right. It was his friend Shine. But she had tears rolling down her cheeks and her face was red. "Are you okay?" "Don't worry about me, Sol. I'm fine. The question is, are you?" "No." "Why are you out here?" "Long story." Sitting down, Shine says, "Well, I'm listening." Sol collected himself enough to tell his story to his friend. As he finished the tale, he burst into tears and Shine walked over and nuzzled him. "Shh, Sol, be calm." "Why?" "Sol, remember earlier when you told me you were going to ask her out?" "Yeah." "Why?" "Okay, that's not how you spell yeah. They spelled it Y-E-A. You need an H at the end of that." "Well, when I went back to my den," she says while blushing, "I spent the whole entire day crying." "Why, Shine?" "Because I love you, Sol," she says, looking down, her face bright red. Shine blushed even more, leaning over and kissed Sol. Sol's eyes widened and he blushed. "Don't you mean Sol's eyes widened and he blushed?" But as she realized what she just did, Shine got on her paws and ran off, leaving a shocked Sol alone in the clearing. Okay, you need a period to end that. Sol sat dumbfounded at the event that had just occurred. Then, as though the tide had just come in, his mind was once again filled with sorrow. He continued sitting on the mossy stone while Shine ran away, his mind filled with capacity due to everything that had occurred. Still sitting on the same position, his mind drifted off to an uneasy rest, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. And I guess that's the end of the story. I mean, it had a conclusion, but not really. So I'm wondering if this author is going to write more. Okay, my review. For technical things, the story needs a bit of work when it comes to like the layout and the grammar. I mean, I didn't really think the punctuation was that bad. I mean, they had missing periods and other punctuations, but not terribly bad. It definitely needs paragraph spacing, and it seems like the only time the author uses paragraph spacing is to imply, you know, when time passes, like if it's a flashback to present time. Other than that, though, I thought the story was pretty decent. I thought the introduction was pretty good. I really felt for the characters, although I thought that Wade and Talon were being jerks. But, you know, the story was engaging, and I think if the author just worked out some of the kinks, the story could be pretty good. Hopefully, if the author is going to continue, they'll have like some type of link at the bottom of this to let people know that it's going to continue. That's why I kind of prefer reading fanfics on fanfiction.net, because at least on fanfiction.net you can tell if the story is complete or not and see how many chapters it has. But yeah, overall this story was pretty decent. And if you're someone who likes Pokemon, I suggest that you go and read it. Well, I'm the FanFic Critic. I read it, you listen, and I need to train so I can defeat Red in Pokemon Gold. pain in the butt. All of his Pokemon are like level 80 and above, and my Pokemon right now are all at level 60, so it's going to be near impossible for me to beat him. So I have my work cut out for me. Wish me luck.